One of the things I love about my job and what I get to do every day is I get to meet parents all throughout the world, moms and dads, who are wanting to make changes in how they parent, and they seek us out for parent coaching help. But I specifically really enjoy lots of times getting to journey with dads who call us up and say, "Man, I keep yelling at my kids. I keep using techniques that I didn't ever want used on me, and yet I don't know what else to do." And like, there's coaching for this, and so today you're going to get to hear an interview with one of the dads. His name's Justin, who I got to coach over this past year. And he's going to tell you a story. He's going to tell you a story about how coaching has helped change his relationship with his kids and really has helped give him the tools to create the relationship that he really wanted with his kids all along. So I think you're really going to enjoy his story. And I think you're going to really relate to a lot of it as well.
Welcome to the Art of Raising Humans.
Hello and welcome to the Art of Raising Humans. I'm Kyle. And wait, Sarah's not here. Oh my gosh, this is the first time we've done that intro without Sarah here. And the reason why Sarah's not here is because we wanted to do something a little different today. So throughout this year, what we're going to be doing is kind of switching some stuff on the podcast. Sarah and I are still going to be teaming up, providing a lot of great content for all the parents that listen to us, but we really wanted to add some more value to you and just some other helpful ways to support you and your family and your growth towards changing those dynamics. So one of those is we're going to have a guest today. So we're going to have a dad on the podcast, a really awesome dad named Justin Foster. He's a dad I've had the privilege of coaching for quite some time now, and really want to hear his story. But throughout the year, we're going to offer more of these kind of dads and moms and parents getting on here and talking about their growth as parents, and also doing some interviews with other experts that are really going to provide a lot of help and support for kids with ADHD and autism and all types of stuff. So I'm really excited about offering that to you. So let's jump right into it today, Justin. So Justin, can you tell the audience who you are?
Absolutely, Kyle. Thank you for having me on, and I'm excited to be able to spend some time with you, this morning. But I have three beautiful kids.
Yes.
Theo is 8, Ellie is just turned 7, and I've got James, who's wild man. He's 4. Married to, my partner and my soulmate, Mandy.
Yeah.
And it's been, that's the most important thing in my life. So I get to talk about that today.
Yes.
And so, I'm really, really excited.
So an 8-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a 4-year-old, man, you are right in the middle of it, right? With all the big emotions, all the huge energy. It seems like it's nonstop, I bet.
Yeah. And there's nothing cooler than being a dad. There's nothing harder than being a dad in terms of, what you have to rub up against in raising these kids. And truly it is an art form that I have not in any way perfected, but I've kind of been on this journey and gotten some help from you. And I've been grateful, for the progress that we've been able to make on building our relationships. And I kind of have this view that that's the most important and worthwhile and meaningful relationship I can ever have is with my kids, and it takes work. It takes skills. It takes tools. It takes, kind of the right process. And, it's a lot of fun to be able to like not do it alone and have you there in my corner doing it with me.
Well, I love being there with you, Justin. So can you tell kind of what's your parenting journey been like? And then what was the reason you're like, man, I need some help. So what brought you to that point? So kind of walk me through kind of how it began and then kind of where you finally said, I want to seek out some coaching.
Well, it seems, when you first become a dad, it's just this pivotal, monumental shift in your life, right? And the most meaningful moment, aside from my wedding night, was being able to hold my firstborn Theo and like looking at him, and just like complete transformation within what the most important things are to me. And so there's just kind of this natural shift that happens when you become a dad that, I think a lot of people just kind of figure out biologically, or I don't know what it is, but for me, that was absolutely the case. I was one way one day when I'm not a dad, and I'm like a different human being the next day.
Yeah.
And that was a really pivotal moment for me. And I didn't realize like, hey, this even gets better with time. You know what I mean? Like this moment, and then
And
and
harder.
harder,
Yes.
and you can't imagine how you could have enough love for two, and then you can have
Mm,
enough love for three,
yeah.
and so
Yeah.
that, that's been a lot of the journey. But really, it's been in the muck of it, in the valleys of parenting, that I felt like, especially as a modern dad, I
Yeah.
was just raised a certain way, Kyle, and
Yeah. Yeah.
and that was
Me
very
too.
much in a
Me too.
traditional
I'm with you.
house
Yes. Yes.
where, this is kind of how you discipline your kids. This is how
Yeah.
you respond to adults. This
Yeah.
is what it means to respect the adults and your parents in your life. And it was very much based on a positional and a sort of a structural belief system that
Yeah.
this is just the way that kids are treated, and this is the way
Yeah.
that adults should be treated, and
Yep.
there's really no questioning that. And I think we've grown up into this era where there's been a paradigm shift in the way that kids are seen and a
Mm,
way that kids are treated. And as kind
yeah.
of like a modern dad, what was happening within me, and I noticed at sort of the lower points, is I had this script that was running in my head,
Yeah.
and I only had like one response to any given situation that
Yes.
wasn't
Yes.
working for me or wasn't ideal.
Yes.
And it was very much, for me, high expectations. And I
Yeah.
didn't know
Yeah.
how to bring in, support
Yeah.
to have a more like balanced approach or response to, situations that are difficult. And these are everyday, basic, kind of situations. The kids are just getting dressed and getting ready for
Yeah. Yeah.
bed. How
Yeah.
do we have a routine where they're going to settle down? And I would notice myself slipping into this pattern and this script of the way that I grew up, because it's like I didn't feel like I was equipped and I didn't have the tools to be able to um, address discipline in the way that I wanted to do it differently going
Yeah.
forward. Does that make
Well,
sense?
yeah, totally. And I remember when I first met you, Justin, you were excited. I mean, you felt like a change needed to happen. So you definitely were open and receptive. And you're like, man, I think the tools on my tool belt are limited. And you're
Yeah.
actually a guy who's actually pretty good with your hands. You're good at building things. So I think and to use that metaphor, it's like to build something really beautiful, you need to have a lot of tools. Like
Yeah.
if you're just walking around with a hammer and a screwdriver, you're going to be pretty limited in what you're doing. So I think you came to me with this idea. Okay, I bet there's more tools, and I bet Kyle could help me. But I remember some of your specific fears, which I'd love you to talk about. That is, you heard about things like peaceful parenting, you heard about like gentle parenting, and there was kind of in you something in you, this dad thing in you was like, ugh. Sounds so
Yeah, really.
gross, right? It sounded
My,
so weak and so
yeah.
like, so I know you were really, you were open, but you were also kind of like closed off, thinking, I don't know if this is for me, right?
Yeah, and it was a wrestling match because, just the way that men, behaved and acted, and fathers acted, and the way that I grew up was, you just didn't question your dad. You didn't
Yeah.
question your grandpa. You didn't, um, you know, there was no, really the only tool was like a hammer, or
Yeah.
the foot being down, you know
Yes.
what I mean?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
and that's sort of how I was raised. My dad was an amazing dad.
Yeah.
And we built a great relationship. He's one of my best friends,
Yeah.
but I wanted to have more tools in my tool belt, but I didn't know how to use a screwdriver, man. Like, and so you would tell me things like, well, here's a way that you could approach this that would be more effective. And it was because I had this script going on in my head and I was just used to using the hammer in every given
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah.
It was very difficult for me to actually learn how to use these different tools. Like,
Yeah.
number one, that they exist wasn't
Yes.
something that I
Yeah.
necessarily believed early on,
Yeah.
because it's such a powerful hold, the way that you're, raised to
Yeah.
just kind of lean into, that script that's going on in your head.
Yeah.
But the other part is just the practicality of, look, when you're in that situation and reflecting back, instead of whipping out the hammer, if you get the screwdriver out, you can hold it like this and you can
Yeah.
do this and you can kind of
Yes.
turn it. And you helped me really break it down simply, step by step, on how I can approach this. For me, it was, I needed to bring more support into my expectations. That my
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
expectations, not, they weren't bad. It's
Yeah.
just that they were not appropriate if I wasn't providing the right level of support.
Yeah.
And
Well,
that's what I started to
yeah.
learn about.
Yeah. Well, and also just seeing your strength as a dad. I think you and I both were raised in similar homes, and I do find it amazing, Justin, as I switched and did added more tools, my relationship with my own dad actually became better. So,
Mm,
it wasn't like I got more judgmental and mad about my dad, is I realized he did the best with what he had, but I have more. So I
mm.
could do better, right? And my,
Yes.
my my own dad, I bet your dad would say the same. My own dad would say, "Man, if I knew what you knew, I would have done it better too." But like, I didn't
Yeah.
know anything. Like my dad did do better than his own dad, and I'm
Yes.
doing better than him, and that's the hope. But I remember you had a really interesting hang up there. I remember in the time working with you, there was at first it was like, okay, maybe being a peaceful parent doesn't have to look weak and gross. Maybe I can still be a man and I don't have to become a mom to do this, right?
Yeah.
But you were really hung up on, and I remember we had like almost like a whole one-on-one about this. It was like yes sir and no sir. Like you
That's how I want to
really
die on that hill, right? Yeah,
you because to you that was the delineating
that's right.
thing. If I'm gonna buy into this, Kyle, I need to still believe that my kids have to say yes sir and no sir,
Yeah. So
right?
I think there is some truth to the positional part of being a parent, right?
Yes.
I mean,
Yep. Yep.
you have a title,
Yep.
but you have to earn their respect, is what I started
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
learn
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
you.
Yes.
And the way that you do that, the next step is to build a relationship.
Yeah.
So what I experienced was a lot of it was humbling to do this
Yeah.
because and it wasn't like, okay, here's all these tools and we're going to do, a whole session on exactly how to use these tools. It was like, you kind of need to put yourself out there and be a little bit more vulnerable with your kids if you're going to be able to build a relationship. So let's think about and reflect on why it is that you yell at your kids and
Yeah.
have these false kind of set of expectations. What's
Yeah.
going on there? And you helped me realize that I was actually afraid. I was afraid that my kids were going to be grown up and not listen to
Yeah. Yes.
authoritative figures in their life,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
and that was way more about me than it was about
Yeah.
them,
Yeah.
and once I started with um the practice of giving options instead of putting them in a corner. And
Yeah.
that was really
Yeah.
helpful because I would just say, hey, you can either, put your PJs on right now, or we can go brush our teeth. Which one do you choose? And
Yeah. I
give
love
them the
that.
authority
Yes.
to be able to do it. And
Yes.
that was
Mm.
easier for me to just move from, okay, there's one option. It has to be the
Yeah.
one that I picked in
Yeah.
my brain to
Yeah.
now I'm going to respect you
Yeah.
and give you these choices and kind of be, um, your guide in terms
Yeah.
of making these decisions the way that I want it to go. And then the second thing that I learned is that if I messed up and I did yell at the kids or I did, kind of get into my own script and lower
Yeah.
brain,
Yeah. Yep.
then I need to repair that. I need to find
Yeah.
a way that I could genuinely repair
Mm.
that.
Yeah.
And what I realized is that when I do that, that's more about me. It's all about me, really, and my fear, and not about them. And I told them that just straight up. This is
Yeah.
when I yell at you, this is what's going on inside of
Yeah.
my world.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, but that's never about you. That's always about
Yeah.
daddy.
Well,
And so
yeah.
that
Yeah.
started to build the relationship differently.
So good. Yeah. And Justin, what I love about that is I know the reason why we talk a lot about that and why I encourage dads to do that is because I want to limit just the crap that I'm putting on the kids,
Yeah.
right? The goal isn't to never yell. The goal isn't to be this perfect parent who's constantly
Mhm.
in this great space in their prefrontal cortex. You're going to mess up. And actually, just like with almost anything in life, it's about what you do when you mess up. That's actually what makes the difference. And every time you and I mess up, Justin, as dads, as parents, every time we lose it on them, and we go back and we repair it and we work through it to help better understand what was happening in us and in them, we end up teaching them how to do that with themselves too, because you
Mhm.
don't want to have these kids who have these expectations that they have to be a perfect kid, that they can never mess up. Like mistakes are welcome. Bring
Yeah.
them, right?
Well, it's
Come
like it's
with your
kind of
mistakes.
for me, it became the material to I didn't know that this was actually happening, and I kind of feel like you were like, you were just you weren't giving me it all, but you were kind of inviting me into this process and helping me to see how it's through the weakness that you get the strength. So going back to being the man's man or the dad who, doesn't, peaceful parenting is,
Yeah.
just a really cop out way of demasculinating people
Yes.
or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that's absolutely wrong. That
Yeah.
what peaceful parenting is, it's about the skills of negotiation. And
Hmm.
what negotiation is finding a middle ground between things where it's not win lose, it's
Yeah.
win win for everybody.
Yes. Yes.
And I
Yes.
think of that, I'm a business guy, so I kind of
Yeah.
think of that, but
Yeah.
really if you want to build a relationship like with your spouse or something, you're
Yeah.
constantly negotiating,
Yeah.
and that the outcome of that negotiation should be never like tit for tat,
Yeah.
brass tacks back and forth. It is better for you, it's better for me, it's better for the kids, it's better for me, and everybody kind of levels up when you find that middle road. And it is a middle road. I mean, for me, I was tending to be more on the side of more judgmental,
Yeah.
again,
Critical.
more
Yes.
critical.
Yep.
And
Yep.
it's like you're not listening, you know what I
Yep.
mean, type of
Yeah. Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But other folks can find themselves going, I think, on the other side of this, which is just very permissive and that sort of
Yes.
thing.
Yep.
And what we're trying to do is just find an optimal place as a parent, I feel like,
A third
where,
option. A third
yeah, a
option,
third
right? Yeah.
option
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
the right
Yes.
smack
Yeah.
dab
Yeah.
in the middle of that,
Yeah.
where,
And I love, like you said, in the business world, which you're a very successful businessman, Justin. And I think a lot of dads can relate this too. That many of them were that they'll read something about peaceful parenting or gentle parenting, whatever, and they'll be like, oh, gross. But then they'll go to like a conference with their business and like, oh wait, they're teaching great managers to do this. They're teaching
yeah,
like
yeah,
the best leaders are leaders who look for win-wins. They're not
yeah,
looking for lose win or win. And who wants to work for the boss who's always winning and you're losing? That sucks,
mhm,
right? And then what I think is cool is as you're doing that with your kids, Justin, we're actually raising kids who want win-wins with us too. So then when
yeah,
by the time your little three kids are teenagers, they're thinking in relationship to you and mom how to win-win, right? Instead of going like a lot of teenagers, almost all the conflict is they have been trained since they were little on how to do win-lose scenarios. So they're really
yes,
good at making sure, like, hey, you've been winning a lot, mom and dad, but now I'm a teenager and I'm gonna stink and win now. So
yeah,
I'm gonna do what I want, and so it's gonna be a win-lose. I don't know how to do it, but when you teach them that, not only does that help your relationship in those later years, but then when they become adults, they'll want bosses who do that. They want to
yes.
create businesses that do that, which benefits the entire world. It's awesome.
And yeah, and if you can be in a negotiation with your parent and feel invited into that, then you're going to
Yeah.
be able to negotiate better with your friends, with your teachers, with your boss, and figure out how to create those situations. And one of the things that I realized is that, like, I had this guy inside of my head, and it's part of just how I was brought up. Where I was like, this shouldn't be a negotiation, Kyle. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
what
yeah, yeah.
negotiation are we
I'm the
talking about
boss.
here? Like,
I'm
I'm
the
the
boss.
dad.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so but what in reality is that it should be a negotiation because they want that, and
Yeah.
I realized that I actually want that. And what I realized was you helped me realize this. My kids really do want to have a good routine. They want
Yes.
to follow,
Yes. Yeah.
through with doing some of the chores. They want
Yeah.
to work
Yeah.
on how do I empty the
Yeah.
dishwasher to help the
Yeah.
family. And it's really boils down to some beliefs, some critical beliefs, and I mean
Yeah.
that technically critical beliefs that
Yeah.
I
Yeah. Yeah.
had
Yeah. Yeah.
that had to eventually shift. And once I shifted those, that's where the tools really started to become meaningful for me.
Yeah.
And it took some work and some time to get to
Yeah.
where those things were running pretty deep inside of me. But once I started to feel like, oh, you're not hijacking the situation and you actually do, want to do these things and be
Yeah.
helpful,
Yeah.
all of a sudden the kid is doing things like the dishes without me
I
even
know.
asking. And it's
I
crazy. And it's
know.
like, it just blows me away that
Yeah.
once I stop this resistance, win lose kind of dynamic,
Yeah.
then there's a flourishing that automatically almost starts
Yes.
happening.
Mm. Well,
And
because think about it, Justin. The flourishing is this. Like when I used to work with teachers, I was school counselor for a while. Teachers would say this. I know parents say this too. I haven't said it, but I think it sometimes where I'm like, well, I've got to win this. When you get in those power struggles,
yes,
I've got to win this. And I would tell the teacher, if you win, do you know what happens to that kid? That kid loses, and you end up just having a kid who's a loser in your class. right?
Mm,
And really, when in our parenting stuff, when we keep doing these win lose things, where we keep using our power as dads to say it's my way or the highway, and we win, you start to raise a kid who believes they're a loser, and
mhm.
that's not what you want. So think about when you do the win win. Now I walk away and I'm like, I'm a winner. It was
Yeah.
awesome, right? And then the kid's like, wait, I'm a winner too. So we're
Yeah.
both winners. And then what I noticed was it made my marriage like that too. Then,
Mm,
with my wife, I noticed early on that lots of times in our discussions, I was trying to win. Like I was trying to win our arguments. I was trying to like outsmart her, and it was hurting my
yeah.
marriage. And so as I did this more with my kids, it actually made where I didn't want to do that with my wife either. I wanted to win-win with her as well, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
beautiful, man.
Can,
Absolutely.
can I ask you, was the change harder or easier than you expected? So making this shift, you talked about this big shift you're making. Was it harder or easier?
It's been a process. And the hardest part has been to, I think there's a challenge in using a tool that I haven't used before. And so what's made that easy is listening to you be able to say, like, in this situation, I was with my Ellie, you have a daughter named Ellie,
Yeah, I
and
do.
this is what I did, and this is how I said these things. And
Yes.
so I would try on some of those things. I would try to make them my words.
Yeah.
And but the hardest part has been the change of belief.
Yeah.
And but once I could maybe submit to this idea that if I can allow myself to show weakness to my kids,
Yeah.
right? And then I can see this relationship start to flourish and everybody all of a sudden gets stronger,
Yeah.
then there's just something to that process, Kyle. I don't know how to describe it
Yeah.
or anything
Yeah.
else that's the real catalyst for transformation happening. And so that's hard. It's hard to give up our beliefs. It's hard to try to see from a different perspective. And yeah, I'm not going to say that that's been easy, but it's been the most worthwhile thing. I quit my job in 2020 to be
Yeah.
home with my kids more.
Mm.
And I wanted to do this real estate thing and
Yeah. Yep.
achieve some level of financial success so that I could buy back my time to be with my
Yeah.
kids.
Yeah.
And COVID happened in 2020, and I was like
Yes.
home with my kids, and it was some of the most beautiful times.
Yes.
And I got to say, there's a lot of suffering going on, and
Yeah.
I'm cognizant of that. But for us, we have a farm, we have kind of this family compound, and we were
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
home,
Yeah.
locked up together, and that was a beautiful thing. It was
Yeah.
also like a really hard thing, man,
Yes.
because
Yeah.
I found myself up against my limits of my relationship with my kids, where I would feel like I'm getting worn down by the end of the day because we've been together all day and I don't have any tools but the hammer at this point. And I
Yes.
knew I just needed to get help from somebody to kind of figure this out. And so I had this idea, and in business for me, it's really great because there's just certain things that you can do that are proven that will work if you work them, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's about inputs and outputs. It's
Yes. Yeah.
very utilitarian
Yep.
by nature, but with family, it's not as straightforward when you're building a relationship, and
Mm.
because there's so many deeper things that I don't know about that are impacting our interactions. And so it took me, really kind of leaning into this process of trying to be a more peaceful dad
Yeah.
and making that important and failing in
Yeah.
order to kind of see some of this fruit. And
Yeah.
that's hard. I'm not going to make light of it, but
Yeah. Yeah.
it gets easier the more I was open to the
Yeah.
change
Yep.
happening and a different perspective. And like I said, it's kind of like watching a plant grow,
Yeah.
it's kind of like,
It's good. Yeah.
okay, you're helping me mend the soil and
Yeah.
and like plant the seedling and give it water. But then in the springtime, when the plant grows into this big old bush with all this fruit, you're just stepping back and be like, oh, that was a miracle. I can't believe that just happened, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. That's awesome, man. Yeah. What would you say? I guess what I'd add to that, I'd say what I heard you say and what I was feeling too was I think a hard part for us was just trusting that we're
Yeah.
not screwing up our kids. Trusting that like
Yeah.
we'd never seen, because for us, we'd never seen anybody do this. There was
Mm,
no families that we know parenting this way. And where we live right now, Justin, in Oklahoma, it was spanking was the norm. I grew up in a home where you got slapped if you talked back, right? These kind. So I'd actually never known anybody who had grown up and didn't get spanked or put in timeout. And so Sarah and I would routinely be like, "Are we screwing up our kids?" That's how I
Yeah.
do. And so, like, I love your metaphor of the plant. Is we just start seeing all this beautiful fruit start to come off
Yeah.
of the tree, and we started to see what they started to grow and become. And then we were like, "Okay, okay, we can trust this. These other
And I
mentors."
gotta tell you, Kyle, when you were telling me like what to do, how to do it, and challenging some of my beliefs,
Yep.
I was really resistant, like you were
Yeah. Yeah.
saying.
Yeah.
And then stuff would happen, and all of a sudden, it becomes super easy to put my kids to bed because I just kind of shifted my perspective the way
Yes.
you did. And I'm like,
Yes.
dang it, it works. I can't believe this works. You
Yes.
know what I mean? Like
Yes.
it's I was almost put off by the fact that
Yes.
all my
Yes.
energy that was going into this, trying to force the situation was for naught. And if I were to just stop resisting and did
Yes.
this, then it just works beautifully. And
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
that's exactly what happened. I
Yeah.
was surprised,
Yeah.
by
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Well, wait, that makes me, and then the more energy you do resisting, the more energy you have to keep doing. It's crazy because you actually,
Yes.
as you resist the kid just gets stronger and stronger and their ability to resist you. So as they become teenagers, that's why it's just so like, oh my gosh, but by then people are definitely wanting help. But man, at the age your kids are at, this is, perfect. So, hey, I want to ask you, what advice would you give to a parent who's seeking out coaching, who's saying like, parent coaching? I didn't know this even existed. What? But they're on the fence. They've heard about it, and they're kind of going, huh? Is that the step for me and my spouse? Or maybe it's a dad going, maybe this is the thing. Maybe I'm like Justin. I need to. What advice or encouragement would you give to them about the benefits of?
Well, coaching for me is about getting a specific result that I want to get in my life. So the way that I approach it, if I wanted to have a coach, is I want to find somebody who is successful in the area that I want to be successful in, that I need help in. And so you want to find somebody, and Kyle, you've been there for me, meeting where I'm at and kind of showing me here's the next step, here's the next level to kind of step into in your relationships. And I think that people are more than willing to invest in coaching and things like I do, like for investing or business
Yeah.
or real
Yeah.
estate. But the best thing I've chosen to invest in terms of my time and my energy and my resources is parenting coaching by far, because it goes back to what I said before. It's the most meaningful relationship you can have in your entire life. And the reality is that it just takes work, that there's some tactics, there's some tools, and then beneath that, there's some beliefs that you can work through, and you can have your cake and eat it too. Like you can have a vision of what kind of father and parent and couple that you want to be, what kind of family you want to be,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
you have to work at that. And no, we shouldn't be doing that alone, man. I mean, we should
Yeah.
be reaching out to people who can help us on the journey, especially in this modern kind of age where parenting has really shifted. And as dads and as moms, we're trying to figure out, okay, what's this new parenting style look like, and
Yeah.
how do I really build a relationship that's optimal,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so submit to the instruction and take the action and be
Yes.
willing and open, to invest in an area of your life that, for anybody who's listening to this podcast, is hands down the most important area of their life.
That's awesome. No, yeah, that's well said. I remember, Justin, many times when Sarah and I were really trying to get the vision of what does this look like to raise kids in a home like this. And really, to be honest with you, it's been better than I ever imagined. But early on, it was, like I said, it was scary. And there's so many times where, since we had access to great mentors, to great
Yeah.
coaches in regards, that Sarah and I would be like, what should we do in this situation? And Sarah would say, I think we should do this. I'm like, no, that's crazy. You can't do that. Like, that's not going to work. Like, and we'd have this back and forth. And then Sarah would be like, let's just contact this person and see what they say. And of course, to our listeners, they don't need to be surprised. Almost 100% that person agreed with Sarah. So they would typically be like,
Yeah.
yes, what Sarah was saying, that's the way to go. And that would typically then, something that could have really been a rift in our marriage, that could have really been this, like, it could have caused a lot of issues, a lot of conflicts. Instead, it just brought us closer together, because then I would listen to this coach. I would come back, tell Sarah what they said, and we'd be like, okay. And it helped us be able to implement it with some confidence, right?
Yeah.
Because it does seem like when you were talking about even the whole choices thing, I remember one of the simplest things we did in just trusting this, and I remember it being like an aha moment was, Abby just wouldn't go to sleep. It was like 3 o'clock. She was like 3 years old, and never in her life had she said no when I told her it was time to go to bed. And when she said no, I did exactly what most dads will do, and I'm like, who do you think you're talking
Yeah.
to? Like, and
Right.
my first thought was like, oh, this is when this starts. I can't let this go on. I've got to squash this now because it's going to be a problem when she's a teenager, right? So I'm
That's
already
right.
thinking about it. So I was like, you're going to bed. And I remember getting really big and mean and loud. And she went to bed. And part of me felt, victorious because I
Yeah.
won that battle. But then the next day, you know what sucked, Justin? She did it again the next day. So I was like,
Yes.
wait a second. I thought we dealt with this. Like, don't you?
Yeah.
And she did,
Yes.
and I'm like, okay, this is not working. Like, this is 2 or 3 nights in a row. And even though I was victorious, I kind of felt like crap. Like
Yes.
I didn't like that I was at that time like a 34-year-old man intimidating a little 3-year-old girl, right? And so I was like, I got to figure it. So I'm like, okay, fine. I'll do what these people say. I'm going to respect her autonomy, believe she has a free will, and I'm going to try to guide it. And so I walked up and I remember I just said, hey, it's time to go to bed. And she said, no. And I said, how do you want to go to bed? Do you want to go to bed like
Mm.
this or like this? And she's like, no, you want to go to bed like this or like that? And then I get given different. And then finally, I remember I said, do you want to go to bed like a ninja or like a Jedi? And I
There you
remember
go.
she goes, what's a Jedi? And I was like, you don't know what a Jedi is? So I'm like, honey, get up, like you got a lightsaber. And we went back and we're like, and she was laughing and she went to bed and I felt great. And so did
Man,
she. So did she.
it's so great. And I really resonate with, my wife is an amazing mom, an
Yep.
amazing parent. And
Yep.
she has a background in working with kids. And so she has all these tools like in her tool belt, right? And as a dad, I just felt like I have the hammer. I have the one tool and then but in our marriage, especially kind of in this new family that we're trying to build where I'm at home a lot and everything else, we really didn't, the vision is not, okay, you take care of the home and then I'm going to go to work. The vision is we're doing this together. It's way more kind of equal between us and how we're doing parenting. At least that's what we thought. But
Yeah.
I'm the ill-equipped one. And so, but my wife would say certain things and say certain things in certain ways where I
Yeah.
just didn't connect with it. And then
Yes.
you would tell me the exact same kind of thing, but you would also have more of a dad feel,
Yes. Yeah.
So more of a dad feel is being more playful,
Yeah.
being a little bit more like the ability to be joking or something, not making
Yes.
it a big deal. And then when the
Yes.
kid feels like you're not making it a big deal, then they can
Yes.
make light out of
Mm,
it and they
mm,
can laugh. And
yeah.
and that's like a dad move, I feel
Yeah.
like, And so
Yes.
so I've learned
Yeah.
how to go not resist the resistance, but to go
Yeah.
with the resistance in a way that is playful, it's
Yeah.
helpful, it's and useful, but it is from a masculine energy.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not from a feminine energy. And there's a certain vulnerability too that I've embraced that's been good for that to
Yeah.
happen at the
Yeah.
same time. So there's nothing wrong with if you want to build a good relationship, leaning into that vulnerable side. It sucks,
Yeah.
to tell you the truth, but
Yeah.
that becomes really, I think, the catalyst for this kind of change to happen.
Well, and I think to that point, that's what was missing a lot of with the old school parenting. It was not only a lack of tools, but a lack of vulnerability.
Yeah, and
Lots of times being vulnerable was not okay. It was not safe. Yeah.
I think you would say maybe my grandparents,
Yeah.
their parents never apologized to their
Yes.
kids, not
Yes.
once in their life,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And then
Yes.
my dad and I started to really develop a great
Yeah.
friendship when
Yeah.
he initiated some form of vulnerability,
Yeah.
but that
Yeah.
was more towards, he was my hero
Yeah.
and he could do no wrong up until a certain point. And I realized, oh, you got some chinks in your armor, bro. You know
That's
what I mean?
right.
And
Yes.
and now when you can basically show that early on, it's actually good. It's good for the kids, I think, for them to be able to see the chinks in my armor because it helps us to build a real
Yeah.
authentic relationship
Yeah.
even earlier.
Yeah.
And that's very, I mean, I didn't know that. I didn't know that
Yeah.
you could do that with like a 3-year-old, you know what I mean?
That's
Or a
right.
4-year-old.
Yes.
I
Yes.
thought, okay, later on you need to see my
Yeah.
chinks and I can share those things. But
Well,
no,
no, that's so good because some dad, well, yeah, when they're 13, 14, we'll do. But like, no, you're not, dude. That's not going to happen because you haven't been doing it all that time, right? And then the kid's gonna be like, this is like a really weird conversation. Like I don't really want to have
Yeah.
this. But you're making me think. I almost want to like call some of the coaching I'm doing with dads and stuff like ninja dads.
Love it.
Like
Yeah,
Jedi
yeah,
dads,
yeah.
The Jedi dad coaching, right? But I hope for all the listeners who are listening to this and this kind of first kind of testimonial or kind of like first interview of a parent that we've helped, I hope what they're hearing is just the reward of you being able to switch from one certain type of viewing, like how you envision parenting had to be, and all of a sudden your mind expanded and your ability to picture what it meant to be a dad didn't have to look like however your wife was doing it. Right now, it had
No.
a lot of similarities to it, but it had a different energy to it, a different thing, and that your kids needed that. Like they actually didn't want you to just check out, and they didn't want you to come in screaming your head off either, but they did want you, and they wanted you fully engaged, right? And so I hope the listeners are hearing, if that's something that you're thinking, man, like I'm a dad and I've never heard of this, or I definitely need help in trying to be that kind of dad, or I'm losing my relationship with my kids, and I need some help. I hope today you were encouraged to know there is that, right? And so if you're interested in that, I'd love for you to reach out to me at Kyle Wester at parentinglegacy.com. And I'd love for you just to say, dude, I need that. Let's try to do that,
Yeah.
right? And I think, Justin, you have been so fun to work with. It's been so awesome because you're such a smart person. You're so talented and creative in so many ways. And sometimes, though, it's just funny. And I know I can be about this in other ways. You would come to me with these issues that you thought were really big, and I'd be like, oh, yeah, that's easy. We can
Yeah,
totally do
it
that.
is. So it's such
Yes,
a small shift can go a
yes,
long
yes.
ways,
And it
you
was well
know?
because you were so close and you didn't even see it. It was just like
Yeah.
all I need to do is tweak this or say this differently or approach that differently, right?
Mhm.
And then that makes the change completely. Like the whole situation changes, right? And that's true, like in business and real estate and all the stuff that you're good at. Is this like you just make a little tweak and you tell somebody, oh, just do this, and all of a sudden, bam! All of a sudden, the money starts to come, the success is there. It's fantastic, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Can I share a story real quick
Yeah, do
before
it.
we
Yeah,
wrap
yes, yeah, of
up?
course. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And we'll wrap up
Well,
with the story. It's great.
one of the kind of wins that highlights this peaceful parenting ninja dad approach, and I don't want to overemphasize, that it's always just through falling over yourself. Like what a success look like, with tying this together. Well, I had an instance where my 8-year-old uh, was at school and he decided to change something on his test. And so he kind of told the teacher and told us, his parents, that the teacher actually got this correction wrong, that he got it right, but he had actually gone in there and kind of changed it so he could get,
He's so
an,
smart.
an A.
Good for
Yeah, he is. And so we don't care if our kids get A's, right? Like
yes,
at
yeah,
all,
yeah,
but
yeah.
lying is a big deal. Cheating is a
Yes,
big
yeah,
deal.
yeah.
And so I had some moments to kind of reflect on how do I actually come in here and approach this. So I sat down with Theo, my oldest, and I asked him, I said, hey, what was it about this that you felt a need to erase that and then change it? And he kind of shared his feelings about that, right? And I just listened to what he had to say without any kind of judgment. I didn't say, in this house, we don't cheat. In this house, we don't lie. That's what I wanted to say.
Yeah.
And I would have been punished or grounded in a certain way where it was like a heavy handed top down approach. And I told my son a story and I told him, you know, Theo, when I was about to right before I met your mom, it was before you were born. I got in trouble, and I told him, "Man, I went out and I had a drink, and I actually got in trouble by the police after I had a drink when I drove home. And I was in order to kind of amend for that, I had to go and I had to do community service, and I was faced with." An instance where I could either tell my boss the truth or I could lie about that. And I felt like I should tell my boss the truth. And so even though I had gotten in trouble, I went into my boss's office and I told him, hey, I got in trouble. Here's what's going on. I have to do this community service. I'm not going to be able to work the hours that I need to work. And when I went and did the community service, I did it at the church where your mom worked. And 6 months later, after I met your mom, I actually quit my job and we got married. And you're here today because I decided to tell the truth in that
So good.
instance.
Yeah.
And that you don't know what gift you are going to get if you decide that you're going to tell the truth. Like there's a
Yeah.
blessing in store for
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
when you tell the truth. And so
Yeah.
what you're going to do is you're going to go to your teacher tomorrow and you're going to need to tell her the truth that you changed this, right?
Yeah.
And that's really, really important for you to learn how to do. And so we practiced, how do we tell the truth? How do we kind of confess? And it was a big deal to Theo, like,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
no, I can't
Yes.
tell my
Yes.
teacher or anything
Sure.
else. But
Very scary.
it was this very appropriate balance of the father who is, like in that moment, I was a dad who was, um, saying this isn't the right way
Sure.
and kind of
Sure.
calling
Yeah.
that out.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I was using my stuff and my failure
Yes.
to be
Yeah.
able
Yeah.
to
Yeah. Yeah.
emphasize like how you can, it's okay to make mistakes, but this is how we're going to be the type of men who repair those mistakes and move
Yes.
forward. And
Yeah. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that's tying together this idea, the vulnerability and, kind of meeting your kids where they are and not being afraid to lean into that because it's really kind of the stuff that makes this work
Yeah.
more
Well,
than
and
anything else.
if I can add, though, an important piece to that is some kids by 8 wouldn't even be open and receptive to that story if they
Mm,
assumed dad was going to come in and just harp on all the bad things I did, right? If they
yeah.
assumed dad was going to come in, be scary, be mad, be all, shaming, the kid would close off. And he might kind of listen to the story, but be like, I guess the point of the story is you don't like me. That's
Yeah.
the point. But instead, he was able to be open and receptive. He's like, oh, dad's gonna help me with this.
Yeah. I've made mistakes
And
too,
yeah,
buddy.
yeah, yeah.
Like this is how
And
we
well,
apologize,
and the reason why I believe that is because dad has done that many other times when I've made mistakes. He
Mm,
didn't come and just try to be a hammer. He came and actually tried to help me learn how to learn from the mistake. Right.
mm,
And I love
mm.
it. You didn't throw out, what the consequence of this is, son. Right. It was
The
just like, hey,
Bible
son,
says,
I know
or
whatever
whatever.
you're going to
Yeah.
use. Instead, it was like, son, let me help you. This is actually a moment. This is a really cool moment. And actually, it's a cool moment that maybe Theo will never have to experience what you went through, right? Because he
Yeah.
learns this moment at 8 rather than learning this moment in his 20s,
And
right? Isn't that
I
awesome?
share
Yeah.
that story because
Yeah.
there's no way that I would have ever shared
Yeah.
that story with my kid and been in that situation and approached that situation that way if it wasn't for our sessions together and working through some
Yes.
just really basic
Yeah.
things for me.
Yeah.
And I just I'm so grateful for it, and those are just those really gem moments
Yeah.
and it's not perfect in our house at all,
Yeah. Sure.
but it's better than I could have imagined
Yeah.
before I started
Yeah.
working with you. So
Well,
thank you.
I think you can start when I talk to you now. I can see you see the path. You see that there isn't like, yeah, but is this going to work? It's just like, okay, how do I get that? I can see the path. How do we go down that path? Right? It's
Mhm.
much different conversation. So, Justin, I want to say thank you so much for being so vulnerable and open, so other parents could share. Because I know so many people listening are feeling the exact same thing, and maybe they feel hopeless or they feel confused. So they don't know the direction to go, and so I hope they feel a sense of like, oh, there is a way. There are other people doing this, and they're finding that path forward. And there are families like ours where we're doing these things, and they are flourishing, and we're not making that up. Like it's for real. All right.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for your time. And for listeners, we may be putting this on YouTube on video. I don't know. We'll see. So if you want, you can see me and Justin talking. We haven't done any of our podcasts yet on video, but this may be the first one. And I know it was longer than normal, but I think it was very beneficial. So thank you, Justin, and have a great day.
Thanks, Kyle.
The Art of Raising Humans podcast should not be considered or used as counseling, but for educational purposes only.